Hey everyone, and welcome to another Halo installment. This time we're going to do a little bit of a different video. We've sort of completed our implementation series, and Morgan and I were thinking about, what else can we do around Halo, and we've come up with a Q&A series. So what we're going to do is kind of cover off some of the questions that Morgan sees in his travels on being a consultant, and some of the questions I see as being, people are asking all the time. We're going to try and cover those off as much as we can in these videos. And if anyone does have any other specific questions that they want to ask that maybe aren't on Reddit or anything like that, feel free to leave a comment in the description below, and we'll absolutely answer those. So without much further ado, he needs no introduction, my favorite person at Halo, Mr. Halo himself. How are you doing today, Morgan?
Yeah, very well. How's it going, Chris? Happy New Year, and Happy New Year to everyone watching. Yeah, so we've got dozens of hours at this point where we've gone through the implementation series, and we spent that time sort of covering the core modules and providing people with an understanding of how they work. It was really sort of for people brand new to Halo that didn't have any idea where to even start. They can follow this implementation series and hopefully get somewhat of an understanding as to how Halo PSA is supposed to function. And then we came to the end of that, and we were having a chat last week, and you're sort of thinking, right, okay, well, the community value these videos. Where do we kind of go next with this? And
actually, the way the chat went is Morgan actually said, you haven't called me Mr. Halo for a little while, and I'm getting I'm feeling a little bit kind of left out. So I said, well, let's make some more series that I can kind of blow your trumpet for you. So that was the real reason, wasn't it, really?
Yeah. Any excuse. Yeah. But sort of, I suppose some of the feedback throughout the community has been, well, there are these like not small, but there are these relatively niche configuration options. I'm not quite sure how to do this specific thing. So what we're going to try and do is tackle some of those questions. I've got a report here that's got the most frequently logged tickets in our instance of Halo by category, so we'll tackle some of those. Also take some questions that come directly into my inbox, some questions that land on the Halo PSA subreddit, anything that Chris has got as well. And yeah, it's very much trial and error, I suppose. We'll see how it goes. We'll hear feedback from you guys and take it from there.
Yeah. Yeah, and equally, like I said, if you've got any questions, leave them in the comment. But equally, if you think that the series isn't something you guys want to see, then then let us know, and we'll obviously stop it there. We want to make these videos as useful as they possibly can be to the majority of people out there. So
yeah, absolutely. So it'll be very freestyle, be a bit all over the place. We're not going to be covering any one specific topic. It's going to be a lot more bite-sized, small bits here and there. So yeah, without further ado, I suppose one of the where we'll kick off is someone had a question on the Halo PSA subreddit recently asking about custom or dynamic SQL lookups. So we'll briefly talk about those. So Halo provides the option to create custom fields, allowing you to track whatever type of data you need to track. But quite often, people will want these custom fields, namely the single and multiple select dropdowns. They'll want the data in that dropdown to be pulled from some other part of Halo. A good example would be for offboarding, right? For an offboarding request, you might want to provide a list of users that are at the same client as the client who's logging the offboarding request. So I thought we briefly talk about that real quick.
Yeah.
So in configuration, custom objects, custom fields, we can create custom fields of type single or multiple select. And when we have our field type of single or multiple select, we have our lookup type here. So let's just call this user list. Now, of course, a lookup type can be static, where you're just plugging in comma-separated values that equate to each option in the dropdown, or you would have your list be basically a mini SQL query that's querying your own database. Now, the structure of this query is that we must return two columns, an ID column and a display column, the display column being what you'll see in the dropdown. So if we were to query the users, we would want something like select UID as our ID, which is the ID of the end user, and username as display, which would be the user displayed in the dropdown from users. Now, I guess this could work, right? However, this would return every user in Halo to everyone that had access to this field.
Yeah.
So what we probably want to do is filter this down. Now, there's two primary filters that you can use, or two variables, I suppose. $fault ID and $user ID. Yeah, we can also use variables based on other custom fields, but maybe we can come back to that if anyone in the comments is interested in learning more about that. But for now, we'll talk about fault ID and user ID. Of course, $false ID is only applicable once a ticket has been logged, right? Before the ticket's been logged, there is no fault ID. $user ID, again, applicable once a ticket has been logged, or if the ticket is being logged via the portal, $user ID will be inherited from the end user that is logged into the self-service portal. At which point, if we wanted to get the list of users that are at the same site, we could do something like this, from users where uSite equals, well, actually, no, we'd want to join from users, join site on site num equals uSite, where site num equals select user.
You can see that Morgan's done this before because he kind of knows these SQL queries offhand. So
yeah, well, I mean, the user list is one that comes up quite frequently. But this could be anything. I made some lookups for an MSP that was using Halo, and they wanted a list of assets, the same customer, where the asset had a certain type and it had a certain value in the field. Same concept, a little bit more fiddly and a little bit more complicated, but yeah, same premise. But here, yeah. So so now we're getting all of the users, we're joining on the site table, and we're getting all of the users where the site is the same site as the user that's logging the ticket. We could go a step further and have all of the users at the same client. And we would just join area on S area equals A area. And then instead of S site num, we'd want where A area equals select S area from site, where S site num equals that. So now we're just saying get the site ID that the user logging the ticket has allocated to them, get the client ID for that site, and get all of the users, all of the end users against that client. Also, you want to bear in mind that you probably want to exclude general user, exclude inactive users, perhaps remove service users. But yeah, the idea here is you can create a custom field of type single or multiple select. If your lookup type is dynamic list, you're presented with a SQL query. The SQL query is two columns, ID and display, and you can use fault ID for tickets that have already been logged, or user ID if the ticket is being logged via the portal. So that was something that came up recently.
Okay.
Another one that came up fairly recently was someone had a question around sort of getting an understanding of the NCE charges, or getting an understanding of what to do when they're selling bill monthly, annual commit, bill annual commit, bill monthly commit, and how to sort of work with a combination of all of those different types of charges. So there's a few options here, I suppose, and just want to sort of cover a couple of configuration options that you might find useful to tackle these kinds of setups, which is pretty common these days. And that involves, we're going to talk about merging recurring invoices. We're going to talk about start and end dates for recurring invoice lines.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the first point to note is the schedule for invoice creation is something that resides at recurring invoice level, right? So we can add our products in here. But notice how we don't really have a billing period in here. We don't have a frequency at which to bill. That frequency at which to bill is set against the schedule for the recurring invoice.
Yeah.
So what you might want to do is you might want to have a recurring invoice set up for the customer that is of a monthly schedule, which is just achieved by clicking set schedule and picking monthly. And then a separate recurring invoice that has, for the same customer, but has a schedule instead of monthly, but yearly. Now that means that you'd have these two recurring invoices. One would be created each month, one would be created once a year. But then the next question that follows on from that would be, well, I don't want to create two invoices. I just want one invoice sent to the customer. I want that invoice sent to the customer each month, but once a year, I want there to be an extra line on that invoice. After that, what you might want to consider doing is going to configuration, billing, general, and in your invoice creation settings, there is an option to merge recurring invoices into one invoice per client, as it says on the tin. If one client has got multiple recurring invoices, and at any point in time, more than one invoice would be generated on that run, the lines on that will be merged. So with this, you can have different recurring invoices with different schedules, but when those schedules align, in this case, once a year, that extra annual line will be added onto the invoice that's generated. Now, adjacent to that, sort of related, is the sort of the annual commit section. So we saw that the schedule is set at recurring invoice level. Now, of course, a schedule can have an end date. However, you might have different subscriptions that have been added at different points during the year, but all have an annual commit. So hence each individual line would have a separate end date and perhaps a separate start date. And we can set that in Halo. And we do so by editing the invoice line, where we have this status section. The status section in here has a start date and an end date, meaning that what you could do is you could have a monthly, a recurring invoice set up with a monthly schedule, but no end date. So it's being created every month. And then when you're adding your lines onto your recurring invoice, you can set end dates in here, which means that it's the same recurring invoice that's being created, but or the same recurring invoice that's generating those invoices, but the lines each month would change based on the start and end dates. So of course, if we were to set a start date and an end date, invoices created before the start date or after the end date will not include this line on them.
Yeah.
Another point, and Chris, we spoke about this fairly recently, was the add recurring product versus add product options.
That comes up all the time, and I see this, and I know what you're going to say. And literally, you can add a product, a normal, straightforward product, to a recurring invoice, and it appears to become a recurring product.
Yeah, that's correct. So the function of these right now is the add recurring item or add recurring product button will return the list of products that are marked as being recurring.
Yeah.
Where a product is marked as being recurring based on this checkbox. There is this option to add a product as well. And when you add that product, it will be added to every instance of an invoice generated from this recurring invoice. So it effectively becomes recurring. I think there are plans, maybe later on in the year, to change the functionality here. So the window that's opened up would look more similar to the utilize window. So and the utilize window gives you a filter option. So I think there's going to be plans eventually to merge those two options into one and just have a default filter applied.
Yeah. So I guess essentially then there's no real reason to tick the box that is recurring product, because that was always, in my opinion, was because the product was recurring and then could be added to a recurring invoice. But I guess at this point, what you're saying is it actually doesn't matter whether we mark it as recurring or not. It can still be added to a recurring invoice.
Correct. Yeah. Marking a product as recurring will do two things. Or two things spring to mind. One, you have the option to specify a recurring cost and price. So it might be that a product is marked as recurring, but you do have a one-time fee. But that one-time fee is different from the monthly fee or the annual fee. And then secondly, the marking a product as recurring will allow it to be presented in this list, which is a filtered list, right? You might have 500-600 products, but only 80 to 100 of those are recurring. You might not want to look through every single one every time. So this button basically applies an automatic filter in there. But in terms of, is it going to be added to every single invoice? Yes. And in the context of that point, there is no real distinction between a product having that checkbox checked or not.
Yeah. And so I guess it's, if you'd never had the option of wanting to have a different price if it was recurring versus if it was one-off, you could just create it as a product, as a normal product, not tick the box. And, well, I guess at that point, ticking the box, as you say, would make it show up in that filtered list. But if you didn't tick the box for it to be recurring, it could still be added to a recurring invoice and still be, quote unquote, a recurring product.
Yeah, technically, I would still advise people mark products that would not go onto a standard invoice as being recurring.
Recurring.
So,
yeah, I mean, I always tell that to people anyway. I always say, make sure that you tick that box just so that it's a recurring product, and then, like you said, it shows up in that filtered list. But this actually came up in a consulting call I had where we were adding stuff and we noticed that it basically was able to be added to a recurring contract, even a recurring invoice, even if it was not marked as recurring. So yeah, glad we managed to clarify that.
Okay. And then if you want to add a product onto a recurring invoice and only charge it once, there is an option when we're editing the line to mark that line as a one-time charge. So if you do want to add something onto a recurring invoice just as a one-time thing, check this box and that's how you would achieve that.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I have another one that actually has come up quite a few times, and I know we've had a discussion around this, and I know we can't do it, but it'd be good to just kind of have that discussion. Was around the ticket number. Many people have asked about changing the ticket number in Halo. Now I know we can change the prefix, that says ID something or other, but it was around how do we change the leading zeros within the ticket number. And from discussions you and I have had, it looks like that isn't possible to change those leading zeros.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we just return 7 digits. So yeah, that's that one.
Okay. Do you want to go in and just show how we could change the prefix on the ticket number? I know we can do that at the email stage and at the ticket type, but it might be worth as we're going through kind of Q&As. Just to show.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So in config email, there is this email start tag and email end tag. So when sending emails out of Halo, the ticket ID will reside between the start tag and the end tag. So this is our global default. Of course, we can change this. But that would be a globally applied change.
Yeah.
And then we can also override that on a ticket type by ticket type basis. So we can go to our ticket types. And here, there is an overriding start and end tag for our respective ticket type. So it might be the incident is IN, service request is SR, etc. Also worth noting that there's an option in advanced settings to always check for ID as well as any other tag. So you can change that email config, you can change that ticket type config, and we would still match on tickets if ID was used, provided this checkbox is checked.
Okay. Yeah. So we could still change it to something else like I for incident and SR for service request, and ticking that would say, irrespective of what it's called, whether it has ID or something like that, it would still work.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, so that comes up a lot. I mean, and I do this with a lot of clients, and I do it myself, is exactly that. I have consulting tickets, I have other tickets, and we have specific prefixes on the tickets when when emails are sent out from various ticket types and stuff like that. So yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Nice.
Cool.
Okay, one of the other things, sort of jumping back to the invoicing piece, one of the other things that came up recently that was a follow-on from the point around the annual commit was, how do we get notified that a subscription is due up for renewal? Or, more specifically, how do we get notified that the end date is approaching on those recurring invoice lines? And to do that, we can make use of automated tickets. So in config tickets, there is this automated tickets module where basically tickets will be logged when some given criteria has been met. The criteria that we're looking for is based on the criteria section. Now that can be, we can be looking for agreements, assets, recurring invoices, or recurring invoice lines. And then based on the entity that we're looking at from this drop down, we have a table of contents below where we can add the specific criteria in. So for example, if our automation criteria is looking for agreements, we can say that agreements of a certain type that have their end date in 90 days will log a ticket. So we pick our entity that we're concerned with, And then we have this table below where we're actually picking the specific criteria, and the options in this table are based on what we select above. So obviously we've got contract type here as an option. If I change this to recurring invoice lines, I don't have contract type, but I might have group. But again, we've got that end date. So we can have tickets logged X days before the end date of a given entity, whether that's agreements, whether that's asset warranty, recurring invoices, or recurring invoice lines. And then in terms of what information, what ticket type is being logged, what workflow is being applied, who is that ticket assigned to, all of that information resides in the values tab. And actually, the options in here are basically the same options as what we have for our ticket templates. Refer to our project management session of the implementation series to get an idea of ticket templates. But yeah, but basically creating a template and saying, log the ticket with this template when some given criteria is met.
Yeah, and that's really good for things like, yeah, when, you know, if a contract's about to expire, or you know, some assets about to expire or something like that, you may want to have a ticket to get somebody in sales to give them a call, or you know, yeah, any kind of ticket to extend the warranty, do whatever you need to do. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. There's been a couple of people on support that have sort of come to me with the same question recently. And that is around the CSP integration, namely Microsoft's move to GDAP relationships for all of our tenants, or all of your tenants. And that's caused some issues with obtaining user information, which, yeah, unfortunately, you know, Microsoft changing that policy has meant that things have had to change in Halo. But what I was going to mention is one of the questions was, okay, so now I can't get the user list for this tenant. And to help you guys with troubleshooting that, you'll often find the error, if the error is related to GDAP and lack of admin consent being provided, the error that you'll probably get is the identity of the calling application cannot be established. So if you're setting up CSP and you're getting issues when trying to import users, and the error that you're getting is the identity of the calling application cannot be established, the first thing that comes to my mind is GDAP. And then the next point is, have I granted admin consent for that tenant? And to do that, once you've set the connection up, in the tenants tab, you've got the list of tenants, the list of customers. And on the right-hand side in the mappings table, there is a grant admin consent button. However, that button only appears if you specify the tenant or the customer relationship as being GDAP. Kind of hard to show without having CSP connected to this instance. But basically, you've got the tenant mapping table, and each row has got a pencil against it. Click the pencil, and a modal window will pop up. And one of the options in there will be relationship type. And if it's DAP, you won't have the grant admin consent button. GDAP, the button appears, click it, log in with the administrator in that tenant, and then you should be good to go.
I was going to say, if you want to connect to my database, I have it set up.
I mean, I didn't want to. We can do if I wasn't sure if you had any sensitive information in your instance.
No, yeah, I don't think anything that anyone's really gonna. I mean, they're all my companies, but
so
yeah.
have you? If you're happy to share your screen, maybe share your screen real quick, and I'll talk you through what I mean.
Yeah, maybe if I just do this and I share this. Yeah, so if we go to oops, so let me just go to integrations.
Yep.
And it was the Microsoft CSP stuff. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So once you've connected everything, all the tabs appear. and you've got this grant admin consent button on the right. Chris, if you click edit, please.
Yeah.
And hit the pencil against any one of those records. Yeah. You'll see here there's a relationship type option. Now, if that is selected as DAP, you don't have the grant admin consent button. So if you save that.
Yeah. So if I save that with DAP, then
the button disappears.
Yeah.
So there's been a couple of people have called up recently saying, I can't get users, it's probably related to GDAP, but I can't grant admin consent. Why can't I grant admin consent? And the reason has been because the relationships there have been DAP. Change it to GDAP, button appears, away you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, you can change it right at the top level as well to make all of those GDAP, or you can change each individual one. Yeah.
Yeah, the problem has been that these are people that have previously set up CSP before the GDAP changes. So they were all DAP, and then it just stopped working because like Microsoft enforced GDAP. So it's like, if you're new to Halo and you're setting it up, absolutely do what Chris says, set the default relationship to GDAP. If you're an existing Halo user and you're having CSP issues, the identity of the calling application can't be established, the chances are you might have records in there that have a DAP relationship.
So then just click the pencil exactly and just change that to be GDAP, and then you get that grant admin consent.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Right. Let's see.
Okay, I'll let you switch back to your screen.
Is there just having a look at the report, is there anything that you've been asked recently that you think would be worth covering?
Been asked a lot of stuff that's kind of very specific as well to to specific issues, but I mean, the ticket number was a big one, right? That was one that everybody's asking. But I also think maybe, and maybe we can pick this up on another call, because I think this video is getting a little bit long. Maybe what we need to do is, I hear a lot of things around the integrations with Xero and QuickBooks and those kinds of things. So I think, and I do have some questions that kind of came up from that of customers, which I've addressed with them around kind of, how to set up that process properly, and how, why do they get certain errors at certain times and things like that. So it might be worth us doing a session on that and going through, some of those specific errors. And I have got them in tickets. I just need to find them. And then I think on the next call we could maybe go through some of those specific issues that customers are having, and then and address those.
Yeah, integrations is one of the more frequently logged ticket categories. So there's a couple. I mean, some have come up around some of the RMM integrations as well. So maybe we'll leave this one here, and the next video we'll do will be about common FAQs around certain integrations. Yeah,
exactly. I think that's a really good place. So I know there's a lot of information in this call today. We'll try and keep these on as much of a topic as we can, so that we're not sort of jumping between, some billing stuff and some ticketing stuff and things like that. So we might, I'm sorry, as I'm moving my hands, my camera's moving too, but we'll try and keep them as topic focused as possible. It would be useful if, anyone watching this, if you can put in the comments if you think these kind of Q&A type sessions would be good. And again, if there's any specific stuff that you want us to go through on these calls, we can absolutely do that, because we just want to make this series something that answers all the questions that people have, and hopefully provide a forum where people can come on and kind of get answers to those questions, rather than going to a million different places for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, as always, Morgan, I really, really appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Appreciate Halo. Appreciate you guys. What you're doing for the community is always a good thing. So always appreciated. And thank you for your time. And thank you to everyone for watching. And we'll see you on the next video.
Thanks a lot, guys. See you on the next one.
Thanks. Cheers. Bye.